It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. That's how it starts, right? That line that sucks you right into the world of 1984. But clock striking 13, what's that all about?
I think Orwell's signaling right from the start. This isn't just some ordinary messed up world. This is a world where even time is broken. And it's that feeling, that immediate what the, that makes 1984 more than just a book. It's a warning. And in this deep dive, we're going beyond just summarizing. We're digging into what makes that warning so effective.
Okay, so you open the book, you're in Oceania, Winston's world, and everything's just off. Not like flying cars, futuristic off, but like familiar things made creepy. The telescreens, Big Brother always watching.
It's that feeling of being constantly watched that Orwell captures so well. Imagine, you're there trying to enjoy a drink of Victory Gin, which is the only kind of booze they've got, by the way. Tastes like, as Orwell puts it, rice spirit. You can't even catch a break with a decent drink. And it's that control over the everyday things that makes Oceania so scary.
You can't escape it, can you? It's in the walls with those telescreens you can't turn off. It's in the language itself, newspeak, like they're messing with the very words you think with.
Absolutely. Think about it. If you control language, you control what people can even think. It's subtle, but powerful. And that's why something as simple as Winston writing in his diary is such a big deal in this world. He's taking back his own thoughts, and in Oceania, that's dangerous.
And it's not just the external pressure, is it? There's the whole internal thing, too. The thought crime, the fear of the thought police, always there. It's like that feeling when you think someone's reading over your shoulder while you're on your computer, except it's your every thought.
And that's where Julia enters the picture. She's a rebel, but not in the same way as Winston. He wants to bring the whole system down. She just wants to live her own life on her own terms.
And here's the kicker. She's a member of the Junior Anti-Sex League. Talk about irony. Rebelling against a system that wants to control desire itself.
That's Orwell's genius, right? The party pushing this whole no-sex thing. It's not about morality. It's about power.
Yeah.
Total control over every aspect of people's lives. And Julia, she uses that. Plays by the little rules so she can break the big ones.
Yeah. Sneaky. Okay, so we've got this oppressive party. We've got Winston and Julia rebelling in their own ways. But is there any organized resistance? Or are they on their own?
Well, that's where things get interesting. Remember O'Brien? That high-ranking party member Winston can't stop thinking about. Yeah. He represents this possibility of dissent within the party itself.
Oh, yeah. That whole is he or isn't he a game, Orwell plays with the reader. One minute, O'Brien is giving Winston a knowing look. The next, he's quoting party propaganda.
That ambiguity is key. It creates this atmosphere of suspicion and paranoia. You never know who to trust, who might tune you in. Even a glimmer of hope, like a potential ally, becomes terrifying.
Right. So the stage is set. Big Brother's watching. Rebellion can be a whisper in a diary or a stolen moment. You can't even trust your own thoughts. Where do we go from here? You know, one of the things that always gets me about 1984 is how Orwell shows the impact of this totalitarian regime, not just on the big picture stuff, but on those small, everyday things.
Yeah, absolutely. Remember that scene where Winston tries to talk to that old man in the pub, hoping to get a sense of what life was like before the party took over? All the guy can remember are these useless little details, totally fragmented, like trying to piece together a dream.
Yeah, you know something happened, but you can't quite grasp the memory.
Exactly. And that's what the party wants, people who can't even think critically about the past, let alone question the present.
It's scary how effective that would be, to control the narrative like that.
Right. If you can manipulate history, you control the present. And without a shared memory, without a way to check the facts, reality itself becomes whatever the party says it is.
That's bleak, man. But then you've got Winston scribbling away in his diary. Such a small act of defiance, but it feels huge in that context.
Totally. It proves that the need for truth, for individual expression, can't be completely stamped out.
Yeah.
Even with all that pressure, even in this world where thinking for yourself is a crime, those sparks of resistance matter.
Speaking of resistance, it's interesting how both Winston and Julia find hope in such different ways, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
He's all about finding this organized rebellion, the brotherhood. She just wants to carve out a little bit of freedom for herself here and now.
It's such a good illustration of how people resist in different ways, right?
Yeah.
Winston, the idealist, looking for a grand revolution. And then there's Julia, the pragmatist, finding those little cracks in the system and using them to her advantage.
Which I guess makes their downfall even more brutal. You're kind of pulling for them, both of them, in their own ways, and then bam.
Ugh, yeah, that moment hits hard. The way Orwell describes Winston's torture in The Ministry of Love, it gets under your skin.
And it's not just physical torture, is it? It's the psychological stuff that messes you up, especially Room 101. Just the name itself sends chills down your spine.
Right. Room 101 is all about mental manipulation, playing on your deepest fears. And we never even learn what Winston's biggest fear is, just that this room, this ultimate threat, exists.
It's the unknown that gets you.
Precisely. Orwell leaves it to our imagination, and that makes it even more terrifying.
It's like he understood how easily fear can control us, make you doubt yourself, your sanity, your memories, which is exactly what happens to Winston, right? He's forced to betray everything he believes in, even Julia.
And that betrayal, that's the real victory for the party, isn't it? To break a person so completely that they not only comply but truly believe.
It's like they want to get inside your head and rewire your brain, change how you think on a fundamental level.
Which brings us to doublethink. The ability to believe two contradictory things at the same time.
It makes my brain hurt just thinking about it.
Right. It's like mental gymnastics, but on steroids. And yet, this is how the party maintains its power. By forcing people to accept contradictions, to deny their own perceptions, they create a population that's incapable of critical thought.
And then there's newspeak. Orwell takes this manipulation of language to a whole other level.
Newspeak is chilling because it's so relevant, even today. Think about how easily words can be twisted, how propaganda and misinformation work. That's what Orwell was getting at. By controlling language, you limit what people can even think.
Like if you only have a limited number of crayons, you can only color within those lines, right?
Exactly. It limits expression, creativity, critical thinking. And the scariest part, newspeak is designed to be self-perpetuating. Each generation grows up with even fewer words, making it harder to even imagine a different way of thinking, let alone a different world.
We've got this systematic destruction of language, this brutal psychological manipulation, and in the end, it works. Winston becomes a shell of his former self, totally embracing Big Brother. Man, talk about heartbreaking. That scene in The Ministry of Love when Winston looks at himself in the mirror, ugh. It's like he's looking at a stranger, someone he doesn't even recognize anymore.
And that's the truly terrifying thing about what happens to him. It's not just physical, right? It's like they've reached inside and hollowed him out.
Rebuilt him from the inside out.
Exactly. It's not enough for the party to control your actions. They have to control your thoughts, your beliefs, your very identity.
And as if that wasn't bad enough, there's that scene later, the one where Winston runs into Julia after they've both been released. Just brutal.
It's like they're both there, physically present. But the connection, that spark that made them who they were, it's gone. They've internalized the party's doctrine so thoroughly that they can't even remember what they once meant to each other.
It's like looking at ghosts. And then those final lines. He loved Big Brother. Not just obeyed, not just accepted, loved. I mean, how do you even come back from that?
It's the total and complete victory of the system over the individual. Winston, who started out clinging to his own thoughts, his own hatred for the party, he ends up completely absorbed by the very thing he rebelled against.
So where does that leave us? Is 1984 just a bleak prophecy with no hope? Are we all doomed to become Winston in the end?
I think that's the power of dystopian fiction, isn't it? It forces us to confront uncomfortable possibilities, makes us question what we take for granted. But I don't think Orwell's message is entirely without hope. Remember that image of the thrush, that little bird, a symbol of beauty and freedom that pops up throughout the book. Even in Winston's broken mind, it's still there.
That little flicker of something the party couldn't crush.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It suggests that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit, that capacity for hope, for love, for something more, it endures.
So what does all of this mean for us then? We may not be living in Oceania, but there are definitely moments when the world feels a little too close to home, you know?
Absolutely. Think about how information is controlled these days. The way language is used to manipulate, to divide, the increasing surveillance in our lives. Orwell wasn't just predicting the future, he was issuing a warning.
A warning that's maybe even more relevant today than it was back then.
Right. And the biggest takeaway, I think, is the need for vigilance. To question everything, to think critically about the information we're fed, and to never, ever take our freedom for granted.
To fight for that little thrush, that little spark of defiance that reminds us we're capable of more. And that's our deep dive into 1984. A chilling reminder that the future isn't set in stone. It's something we create. With every choice we make, every word we speak, every act of resistance, big or small.